their shelves where they are now. And actually, Chris called me a week after I'd given my talk and said, we're going to start putting them online. Could we put yours online? I said, sure. And 4 years later, as he said, it's been seen by it's been downloaded 4 million times. So I suppose you could multiply that by 20 or something to get the number of people who've seen it. And as Chris says, there is a hunger for videos of me. You know. Don't you feel? So this whole event has been an elaborate build-up to me doing another one for you, so here it is. Al Gore spoke at the mentally, as many speakers have said during the past few days, that we make very poor use of our talents. Very many people go through their whole lives having no real sense of what their talents may be, or if they have any to speak of. I meet all kinds of people who don't think they're really good at anything. Actually, I kind of divide the world into two groups now. Jeremy Bentham, the great utilitarian philosopher, once spiked this argument. You know, he said there are two types of people in this world: those who divide the world into two types, and those who do not. Well, well, I do. And I meet all kinds of people who endure it rather than enjoy it and wait for the weekend. But I also meet people who love what they do and couldn't imagine doing anything else. If you said to them, don't do this anymore, they'd wonder what you were talking about. Because it isn't what they do, it's who they are. They say, but this is me. You know, it would be foolish for me to abandon this because it speaks to my most authentic self. And it's not true of enough people. In fact, on the contrary, I think it's still true of a minority of people. And I think there are many, because that's simply improving a broken model. What we need, and the word's been used many times during the course of the past few days, is not evolution, but a revolution in education. This has to be transformed into something else. One of the real challenges is to innovate fundamentally in education. Innovation is hard because it means doing something that people don't find very easy for the most part. It means challenging what we take for granted. That word, disenthrall. You know what it means? That there are ideas that all of us are enthralled to, which we simply take for granted as the natural order of things, the way things are. And many of our ideas have been formed not to meet the circumstances of this century, but to cope with the circumstances of previous centuries. But our minds are still hypnotized by them. And we have to disenthrall ourselves of some of them. Now, doing this is easier said than done. It's very hard to know, by the way, what it is you take for granted. And the reason is that you take it for granted. See, there are things we're enthralled to in education. Let me give you a couple of examples. One of them is the idea of linearity. That it starts here, and you go through a track, and if you do everything right, you will end up set for the rest of your life. Everybody who's spoken at TED has told us implicitly or sometimes explicitly a different story, that life is not linear, it's organic. We create our lives symbiotically as we explore our talents in relation to the circumstances they help to create for us. But, you know, we have become obsessed with this linear narrative, and probably the pinnacle for education is getting you to college. I think to reconstitute our sense of ability and of intelligence. This linearity thing is a problem. When I arrived in LA about 9 years ago, I came across a policy statement, very well intentioned, which said college begins in kindergarten. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. If we had time, I could go into this, but we don't. Kindergarten begins in kindergarten. A friend of mine once said, you know, a 3-year-old is not half a 6-year-old. They're free. But as we just heard in this last session, there's such competition now to get into kindergarten, to get to the right kindergarten, that people are being interviewed for it at 3. Kids sitting in front of unimpressed panels, with their resumes. Flicking through it, saying, "What, this is it?" You've been around for 36 months and this is it. You've achieved nothing. I mean, spent the first 6 months breastfeeding, what I can say. It's outrageous as a conception. It's like Zagat and Michelin restaurants where everything is not standardized. They're customized to local circumstances. And we have sold ourselves into a fast food model of education. And it's impoverishing our spirits and our energies as much as fast food is depleting our physical bodies. I think we have to recognize a couple of things here. One is that human talent is tremendously diverse. People have very different aptitudes. I worked out recently that I was given a guitar as a kid at about the same time that Eric Clapton got his. Doing the thing that you love to do, that you're good at, time takes a different course entirely. My wife's just finished writing a novel, and I think it's a great book. But she disappears for hours on end. You know this. If you're doing something you love, an hour feels like 5 minutes. If you're doing something that doesn't resonate with your is create the conditions under which they will begin to flourish. So when we look at reforming education and transforming it, it isn't like cloning a system. There are great ones, like KIPS. It's a great system. There are many great models. It's about customizing them to your circumstances and personalizing education to the people you're actually teaching. And doing that, I think, is the answer to the future.